Hey guys, it's me again, Zachi VGC, back with the next episode, or next, I guess, video in the team building series, where today we're talking about hyper offense. Yesterday I kind of talked about the intro, like, kind of my generic process when we go over, my generic process when I go through team building, some team building tips to make your life a little bit easier, and just kind of things to look out for and things to avoid doing while team building, right? And then I kind of broke with you my process of building an actual team. Now today, we're going to talk about hyper offense team building, right? This is maybe not my favorite, but one of the more demanding ways of building teams, just because it requires it requires a very strong understanding of your team. It requires very good positioning skills. Like, it's very easy to get out of position hyper offense, and because a lot of your bonds are fast and frail, you don't really have a lot of great defensive switch-ins. So that should actually be like the first thing that we kind of talk about and remember is positioning is key. Now, generally, when I build hyper offense, there's two different types of hyper offense. There's 5-1 or there's 4-2. And basically what that means is that there's 5 hyper offensive bonds to one support bond, or there's 4 offensive bonds to 2 support bonds. In general, playing 4 offensive bonds to 2 support bonds is a bit easier, but playing 5-1 makes it so you have a lot more flexibility in what offensive options you bring. One of the more notable things about hyper offense is you are very weak to triggering. Just on the note that most of your Pokemon are significantly faster and are a lot less bulky, so it's not like you can defensively switch, which also means that protect is key on hyper offense, right? If you find yourself in Trick Room, you're going to need the protect to help stall it out. If you find yourself, if you find yourself out of position, you can need protect to maybe like stall out a turn while you reposition or attempt to reposition. The other thing is redirection is very strong, because your mons, even if you're positioned correctly, your mons tend to be very weak. And so having redirection to kind of soften the blows against these Pokemon is also very useful. So today, because I think 4-2 is a bit stronger, we're going to go to your standard 4-2 hyper offense. I'll talk about 5-1 very briefly at the very end of it. I don't think it is necessary. It's technically stronger on paper. 5-1 is stronger on paper, but 4-2 is more consistent on paper, right? And if you're trying to ladder/do well for tournaments, consistency is key, right? I've played 5-1 hyper offense in the past, and while it was fun, it was very difficult because I had one Trick Room answer, and it was based on hitting a 55% sing. So let's go into a 4-2, right? So in your standard 4-2, standard 4-2 is 2 physical, 2 special, and 2 support. Now, most of your standard hyper offense teams as well will have something along the lines of a choice scarf, band, or specs, right? Scarf obviously to increase your speed and do a lot of burst damage, and band or specs to really heavily increase your damage. Also, helping hand is really strong on hyper offense teams as well, because again, it's just an extra 50% burst damage that you can make your Pokemon do right off the bat. Kind of what I like to do on hyper offense teams as well is have 1 to 2 setup mons on the team as well, plus a redirection user. I'm still not right. The idea is with 1 or 2 setup mons and a redirection user, you don't even have to care if your redirection user gets KO'd, because you can take the turn 1 to set up, and then your redirection user gets KO'd, and then you bring in another Pokemon alongside your setup Pokemon. And essentially it gives you the ability to, because your opponent then has to focus down the Pokemon that is either set up or the Pokemon that is an immediate threat already. And so you go from having 1 immediate threat on the field to having 2 immediate threats on the field. If your redirection user gets KO'd. If your redirection user doesn't get KO'd, you redirect again and either set up or start doing damage. Usually you want, if you're running 2 setups, you want 1 physical setup and 1 special setup mon. Just to kind of make your life a little bit easier. So, that being said, I think that's all I have, as far as the basis of hyper offense goes. you do have to be very aware of trick room. Yeah, you do have to be very aware of your trick room matchup. And speed control is very key. A lot of hyper offense focuses around like playing with Tailwind so that all your mons can invest in some small amount of bulk at the expense of speed. And other like Tailwind support moves like Icy Wind are always really good, or like speed control support moves like Icy Wind and Bulldoze are also very good. So that being said, we're going to talk about hyper offense now. The first Pokemon that comes to my mind when I look at hyper offense, also, I'm going to pull this open as well. This is just always something good to reference when you're team building, because it'll always talk to you about like the very important threats of the metagame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to order it this way. When I do hyper offense, I typically look for my offensive core first and my support core. So I still cannot type. My offensive core first, my support core second, right? And generally you want 2 main attackers you bring to every match. Or two, not necessarily like two splashable main attackers that you feel like you can bring to every match, like regardless of the matchup, because they're just strong regardless. And then 2 flex attackers, and then support mon is dependent on the matchup, right? So that's kind of how I like do hyper offense in my head. So the 2 splashable main attackers that I'm going to look at right now, obviously the first one being Hydreigon. Hydreigon just kind of screams hyper offense. And in yesterday's set, I used Choice Scarf Hydreigon. Today we're going to be using something different. We're going to be using Life Orb Hydreigon here. Levitate, obviously it's the only ability. And on this team specifically, I think we're going to have Hydreigon be the primary Tailwind user, which basically means you have room for this. And we're going to make this in Terrifier. Terrifier is a very common Hydreigon set, and you run Draco Meteor because Draco Meteor is still strong. It's very good burst damage. Heat Wave is a really good spread type fire move. Yeah, spread type fire damage. That is very useful, right? So we'll just do that for the set. The other splashable offensive attacker one that I want to use on this team is Garchomp. Garchomp Hydreigon is really good synergy because Garchomps can throw out Earthquake. I'm going to actually throw that in this slot. Garchomp can throw out Earthquakes, and because of Hydreigon's Levitate, it's immune to it. As for Garchomp's item, I really like putting Lumberries on my Garchomp. And then I like to run Rough Skin as well. It punishes Fake Outs really heavily. Obviously we're going to put Protect on here because I think, again, Protect in general for hyper offense is very useful. As for the second move, I think Dragon Claws might be more common on Garchomp. Yeah, Dragon Claw is more common than Rock Slide. And because of the abundance of dragons running around, you can actually get away with running Dragon Claw, and then I like to run Swordsman's, right? This satisfies the, so yeah, let's, splashable 1 is Hydreigon. Splashable 2 is Garchomp. Flex 1, Flex 2, Support 1, Support 2. And then, so there's a team, and then if we look here, we have Setup 1, Setup 2. And so our Setup 1 right now is Garchomp. And then one more thing is obviously our speed control is Hydreigon. Right, so you can see we have basically like 9 main roles that we need to take care of here. And Garchomp is in 2 of these, Hydreigon also occupies 2 of these, right? That's kind of important. So the next thing I want to talk about is obviously so we have the Splashable Attacker 1, Splashable Attacker 2, and now we need the Flex Attackers, right? Pokemon that you won't necessarily bring to every matchup that are still going to be strong regardless of the matchup. And I think for me, maybe not on this team specifically, but you can look at, obviously in the metagame, a really, sorry, I hate to reuse Mons, but a very splashable special attacker is Goldango, right? However, on this team, on the previous team, we used it with Life Orb Nasty Plot. But on this team, because we're playing hyper offense, and we already have the life orb occupied, I think Choice Scarf Goldango is very strong. Whoops. Choice Scarf Goldango, good as gold. You run Terra Steel here so that you can still like win the 1v1 against other Goldangos. Because if we look at Goldango's common Terra types, it's Terra Steel, Terra Flying, Terra Ghost. There's nothing you can really use that hits all of those for super effective, so you just run Terra Steel. Or actually, I think on this tank you could run Terra Flying. And the reason I'm going to say you run Terra Flying on this team is because it also synergizes pretty well with Garchomp, right? So Choice Scarf, Terra Flying, Make It Rain, Shadow Ball. I like Dazzling Gleam on my choice sets, and then you can choose your support move, and we'll get to the support move later, right? I don't think you need. Does it get Earth Power? No, it doesn't. So I guess the support move we could run on this set would maybe be like a Rock type move, so we can cover Fire types, right? So let's say Power Gym. So then we have our Flex Attacker 1 in Goldango. Now we need a Flex Attacker number 2. Again, this is a Pokemon that you can bring to most matchups, but you don't necessarily have to bring it to every matchup. It doesn't necessarily have to synergize as well, but it can still be a very strong mon. Now, if I'm really I do this a lot, it never really works out for me. But sometimes I just sort these by physical attack and go from there, but it never really works out for me. So there's that. The other thing we can talk about is making this another setup-oriented Pokemon. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do. The other thing we talk about is making this another setup-oriented Pokemon, in which I think Cerulege is actually very strong. Yes, it means that we have 2 physical-oriented setup attackers. However, because Goldango has really great splash damage, and Hydreigon is, our talent support, I think even running like 2 physically oriented setup Pokemon is useful. I'll talk about this in a minute, but the reason Garchomp is Lumberry is because this Pokemon can very easily be burned and isn't as worried about Intimidate because you're raising your physical attack by 2, which is why we're going to put the Clear Amulets on Cerulege, right? So Clear Amulet, Flash Fire, Terra Grass is actually very strong. The reason being is because nothing they're going to be using to hit your Fire or Ghost type weaknesses is super effective against Grass. Also, if we look at Cerulege, which is down here somewhere. Cerulege is the most common Terra type is Grass, and then you have the Fire type to make your Bitter Blades more effective. So the moveset that I like to run on Gold Cerulege that is very effective to me is Bulk Up for setup. And because we're running this thing while bulkier, Protect isn't as necessary on it. So you have Bulk Up, you have Bitter Blade, which is very great for recovery. It helps this Pokemon stay in the field a long time. I like Shadow Sneak as well. And then you can run Terra Blast on this Pokemon. There are obviously other options for moves. So Bitter Blade, obviously Shadow Sneak, Bulk Up, Protect, Swords Dance, Terra Blast, Shadow Claw, Close Combat is a good option. Don't run Ally Switch, it's a bad move, it's a terrible move, don't use it. It's not good for the person using it or the person it's being used against. It puts both players into stupid 50-50s. I like the idea of Phantom Force as well. So like, yeah, you have options that you can put in this last slot. I like Terra Blast because it gives you coverage. As a Grass type, it gives you more coverage into Water types, which are kind of desperately lacking, and Water types really wall Goldango. And so I've run into it a lot where a bunch of like Ice type Pokemon will go Terra Water, so they can resist the Make It Rain. And so if you have your Terra Grass Cerulege, first of all, their Water type Terra Blast isn't going to be very effective, and your Grass type Terra Blast is now going to be super effective against them. As for the EVs, I don't know if this thing's EVs are as important. It already has like base 105 speed, so technically under Tailwind you don't need to invest a lot. I will say I'll probably invest a lot into this Pokemon's HP. I'm just throwing numbers around. I don't know what any of these numbers do. I guess something we could look at is how fast is like Choice Scarf Hydreigon. So hold on. Choice Scarf Hydreigon is 247 speed, and so if we can make Goldango hit 124 speed, we will always be faster than Choice Scarf Hydreigon. And then you can just dump the rest into. Again, I don't know what any of these EVs do. They're just EVs. So there's our offensive core. Hydreigon and Garchomp are pretty splashable. You can bring them to every match. Also, you should make your Garchomp Terra Ground to make your Earthquakes more powerful. Hydreigon to Terra Fire, Goldango to Terra Flying. obviously to synergize with Earthquake and Serial Edge. Now Serial Edge is very like, because we're not running Protect on Serial Edge, we'll say Protect. We'll say this set, the reason we're setting this set is because you do still have your Earthquake on the Garchomp. You could run Terra Grass. I lied, we're gonna run Terra Blast Grass. Reason being is because with bulk ups and grass type coverage, your Earthquakes from your Garchomp aren't going to do very much damage to your Serial Edge. And you can recover the damage off with Bitter Blade. So there's that. Now as far as the support core goes, there's 2 support Pokemon that I think work really well for this. Now, I talked about this, so let's put Flex 2 down as Serial Edge. And then Setup 2 as Serial Edge. Now, support Pokemon 1, obviously I talked about how you have to be aware of Trick Room with hyper offensive teams. And the reason this is an issue is, well, I mean, it's an issue because Trick Room teams will just tear you apart, right? So, obviously the best support Pokemon for Trick Room in the past has been, okay, in my opinion, the Pokemon that I used on 5-1 hyper offense was Clefairy, because Clefairy with Eviolite is quite bulky and it has Friend Guard, and it had Sing back in the day. And so you could just put Pokemon to sleep on a 55% chance turn 1. Unfortunately, we do not have Clefairy, but there is a Pokemon that does Clefairy's role under Trick Room, and it's Amoonguss, right? I'm going to also say Iron Ball Amoonguss here, because we'll get to that in a second. But you're an Iron Ball Amoonguss. I like Terra Water Amoonguss. It's had a lot of success for me in the past, because being like bulky water types have been like a staple of competitive mons. Like, they have a history of being hard to kill. With Regenerator, you can even recover the HP, and just having like very few weaknesses that your opponent isn't normally going to bring in against Amoonguss is usually pretty useful. As for your moves, I think Protect is still really strong on Amoonguss. Rage Powder, obviously for the redirection aspect of it. Spore, which puts Pokemon to sleep under Trick Room, and then Clear Smog. The reason we run Clear Smog here is to deal with, first of all, all the setup mons running around, and this is, Clear Smog allows you more versatility as far as clearing stat stages, because this just clears the target stat stages to 0, whereas Haze on Murkrow from yesterday reverse them all to 0, so it doesn't really work well alongside your own setup mons, right? As for the EVs, I don't actually know the set I've been using. Hold on, I have a set somewhere. Okay, we'll use that. 2-1-8. This is an Amoonguss set that I've used a lot in the past. Oops, not +6, you get the point. Now, the reason we're running Iron Ball is because you can run -0, or minus special attack and 0 IVs, which puts you at 31 speed, which means after the Iron Ball you have 15 speed. And if you look at Torkoal, who has a whopping base 20, being 15 speed exactly, because Pokemon doesn't do remainders, it just drops the remainders off. Being 15 speed, you're actually slower than Torkoal, which means under Trick Room you can put Torkoals to sleep, which is kind of a big deal because Torkoal under Trick Room is very strong. So Iron Ball Amoonguss, and then the last support Pokemon, I brought up that Clefairy had this, and it was Friend Guard, right? There is one Pokemon in this generation, maybe more. Okay, so there's a lot of Pokemon that get Friend Guard in this gen. I actually did not know Vivillon had Friend Guard. That's very interesting to me. But anyways, we're gonna be using Mousehold here, right? Mousehold has Friend Guard, which makes it very strong for support Pokemon, as a very strong support Pokemon on Hyper Offense. Makes it a very strong support Pokemon on Hyper Offense because just your ally Pokemon receiving 3/4 damage from attacks is kind of insane. It allows you to actually invest like a lot more into bulk. Like Goldango could technically invest, like it allows you to invest less into bulk. So you could technically run less bulk on your Serial here, and you could run less bulk than you would run on your Garchomp. I'm going to say right now that you're going to need at least max speed on your Garchomp, maybe less attack, and something that looks like this. Again, I don't know what any of these do. We'll say like even to this. Just to have like a nice even HP number. So Mousehold allows you to run significantly less bulk on your Pokemon, as long as you're very conscious of the fact that without Mousehold you're going to be taking significantly more damage, right? As far as the item goes on Mousehold, I like Wide Lens. It only makes a difference for one move. However, having that one move be 99% accurate is very useful. So obviously right off the bat we have Protect, we're gonna have Follow Me because it's a redirection user. You could run Helping Hand on this Pokemon as well. This Pokemon does exactly what the Fairy does support-wise, and indeed support-wise. Other options instead of Helping Hand or Protect, I still like Protect on my redirection mons because it's very easy for your opponents just to be baited into attacking the support Pokemon, expecting it to go for Follow Me. And then you just get 2 attacks into a Protect. And the other thing is, like, a lot of people see Mousehold as like an offensive Pokemon because of Population Bomb, which I'm just going to put down right now. Because of Population Bomb, a lot of people see this Pokemon as an offensive threat and will target a turn 1 anyways. And so something very strong would be like Tailwind your Hydreigon in front of Protect Mousehold. And then you have Mousehold under Tailwind and Hydreigon under Tailwind, and you can either go for like a Follow Me and damage, or you can go for just Population Bomb plus Draco Meteor and do insane amounts of damage to your opponent on like turn 2 of the match, right? So some other moves that you could run instead of Helping Hand, like I know Encore has been used a lot. Encore is very useful if you catch your opponent setting up, and you can just like if you predict your opponent to go for a setup move, you can Encore them into that setup move. I know Taunt saw some usage as well. Thunder Wave is always a good option because it's another secondary means of speed control. I think maybe even on the set, like, yeah, I think this would be a very good option for the set. As for the EVs, like, you can run this thing bulky. Like, I've ran this thing with the same sets that I do to Indeedee, except with the 4 in here, and then it was. Like, I've run this set before. It's an option. Like 133 speed under Tailwind is still very fast. This is obviously base 111 is a very fast Pokemon. It is actually the fastest Pokemon on this team, despite it being the support Pokemon of the team. Or you could run this because you have Population Bomb and Encore. So yeah, you have options on what you can run with this mon. So that's kind of the crash course on how to build hyper offense. This is a team that I've tested this team a little bit. The number 1 rule, obviously, when team building 2 is... Sorry, the number 1 rule when team building, obviously, is it's never going to work right off the bat. Oh, also, I think Terra Ghost Mousehold could be very strong. I think I used that in the past. I know I've used Mousehold in the past. I don't have it on anything here. But I've used Mousehold in the past, I've run Terra Ghost, just because you can avoid fake outs with Terra Ghost, and still get Population Bomb off with Stab. So, the number 1 rule of thumb, and this goes for all sorts of team building, but hyper offense especially, very rarely is it going to work. Like, very rarely is the first iteration of the team going to work. There will always be kinks that you have to smooth out. Maybe you build this team and start using this team, and I'm going to put the more complicated spread up here just for the sake of having it up here. Just for the sake of having this up here, I'm going to put this up here in case somebody wants to steal this spread. Again, I couldn't tell you what the spread does. It's the same spread that I run on Indeedee. It is literally the same in copies, like the same spread from Indeedee copy pasted, but with the attack and special attack swapped. So yeah, that's hyper offense. Like I said, very volatile playstyle. You can do a lot of damage very fast, even with setup mons on the team. Like involves around. It's very strong when you have your 2 like burst damage attackers next to your setup Pokemon if you're already naturally faster, or setting Tailwind with the setup mon, because you can like Tailwind and setup on turn 1. And if one of these guys tears, it's very strong. If you were, so this is obviously like 4-2, 4 offense, 2 support. If you were to make this like a 4-1 hyper offense split, I personally would drop Mousehold into another like very strong special attacker, like you could say Volcarona. Or, yeah, like, you could say Volcarona on this team. Because you have Tailwind, you can actually make Armor Rouge work as well. Or you could run Gengar. Well, with Gengar, you're running like Triple Ghost, which isn't great, but like you have options for what you could use for your last mon. I do think, like, in general, special attackers tend to be better than physical attackers. They can't be burned. We'll just say Volcarona for the sake of this. Volcarona can honestly run any Terra if it wants to. Protects, Fiery Dance, or Heat Wave. I like Fiery Dance. Terra Blast with a Terra type of your choice, and then like Quiver Dance, right? Just an option you can run, or if you really wanted to, Choice Specs Flame Body, like what? Bug Buzz, Fiery Dance, Terror Blast of your choice, and like Heat Wave is a set that you can run. Or you can even like drop this, run Giga Drain, and run Terra Fire, and have some really strong, like this is a set that you could very easily run with Volcarona as well. So if you were to do 4-1, I would run Mouse. If you were to do 4-2, I'd run Mouse Hold. If you were to do 5-1, I would run Volcarona. It's all just about like what is strong. I think Volcarona is actually very strong. It's very unexplored into the metagame. I'm actually going to say, yeah. But yeah, in general, like 4-2 is a very strong hyper offense. 5-1 is hyper offense if you have a really good handle on how to run hyper offense. Anyways, you get the point. So yeah, I think like 4-2, like I said, 4-2 hyper offense. Where did it go? 4-2 is very strong. I've run 5-1 in the past, and actually, one second, I'm gonna go pull up the report from the 5-1 team. All right, I'm back. So this is just a report I did on the hyper offense team. The team was Thundurus, Landorus, Clefairy, Nihilego, Urshifu, Moltres. That was 6, yeah. And it kind of follows that same thing, right? You have burst damage, you have a setup Pokemon, you have your support, you have burst damage, and you have setup, right? 2 setup mons, burst damage Pokemon, and a Pokemon, like a support Pokemon that's good under Trick Room. So, and it was very hard to use. I used this in a ladder tournament. So yeah, there was that. So yeah, as far as team building hyper offense goes, that's about all I got. I have an example of obviously 4-2 hyper offense and an example here of 5-1 hyper offense. If people are interested in like a more detailed breakdown of this team, it's very old, but if you're interested, I can certainly do that. So yeah, that's about all I got. That's hyper offense. Tomorrow we do balance, which I think is like the easiest team building style to play. So I guess that's all I got for you. If in the future you want me to build teams around very specific Pokemon, I can certainly do that. Just let me know. And kind of let me know, like, what do you think playstyle would suit you better, like hyper offense 5-1 or hyper offense 4-2? Like, which one do you think you would enjoy more? Let me down in the comment section below. And I've been Zachu. I upload Pokemon Scarlet and Violet content every day, outside forces notwithstanding. If that's something you're into, I would very much appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. I'm on my way to 100 subs, and I think I'm very close. And I know that I'm hoping to hit that goal by the end of the year. So if you could subscribe, that would really help me out. Anyways, that's all I got. So peace.